everyone. Come on in, come on in. Second live. Hello, hello. Hi, Shonda. I'm going to let a few more people come in and then we'll get started. Hey, Jazzy Tees. Thanks for joining. I'm very excited about tonight, as I am going to be with every night. Hey, Angela. And we have a special treat tonight. Hey. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Go ahead and add her. LaShonda. Hello,
Hi.
hello. What loves?
Hi. I'm like trying to get my hair in the frame.
Yes. I love
You
it.
never
I
know how
love
it's going
it.
to be with the split frame. So I'm like,
I
okay,
understand.
let me see.
I understand. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm
Good.
good. How are
Good.
you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's just been, like
Good.
you said, just a rainy day today.
Yeah. I was like, I'm going to need all the energy to get
Yeah.
going. It's been a gloomy day here in Kentucky.
Yes.
So Tennessee too.
Tennessee too.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we get the same weather, sometimes we don't. Like I called
hmm
my parents, what was it, last week, and it was really cold there when it was really warm here. So you know
Yeah.
how that goes. You know
Yes.
how that goes.
I
Well,
do.
I know we're both working moms, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. It's been a
Okay.
long day
Yes.
for the
Yes.
both of us. So I'll go ahead and do a quick intro of you.
Okay.
If you all know our next guest, you know this day and time, 11/11, November the 11th, is full of purpose for her. Sean and I met on the hills of Western Kentucky University. And when we met in college, she was definitely a sounding board for me, an encourager, and just a fun human to be around. And she still is. Because we still are. And
Thank
she has
you.
always been focused and determined to go after her goals, which is why I ask her here today. I know a lot of young women, a lot of women and young girls will be so encouraged by your story and just where you are. And so the first question I have for you
Sure.
is, okay, you have had to change career paths just a little bit. So how did you go from majoring in broadcast journalism to now owning your own very successful counseling and consulting agency? So tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
So, the journey that
Okay.
that was. So, I always like to tell people, I think the process of when you choose a college and maybe not choose a college, but you choose a major, I think there needs to be so much more guidance with that, right? And so
I
I
agree.
remember
Yeah.
deciding I wanted to go to Western and,
Mm-hmm.
I remember getting there. It was like a open house kind of day. And so they were like, what is your major? And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay. I knew I wanted to go to college, but as a first generation college student, so many
Mm-hmm.
things were in my mind about
Right.
what I wanted to do when I grew up. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm looking at this list of things and I'm like, I love Oprah. I love, I love the news.
Yeah.
I always wanted to be a voice to the voiceless, as they say. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wanted to tell the stories of people and kind of bring the news of what's happening in the city and around the world, and ultimately wanted to be Oprah. Okay. And
Yeah.
so I just kind of chose broadcast journalism, enjoyed my program. Again, just kind of going through it, taking my classes, took a lot of sociology classes too along the way, and got really
Mm-hmm.
interested in human behavior and how
Yeah.
the brain works and how the mind works and how just environment and conditions that people grow up in, how they shape who
Mm-hmm.
they become. And
Yeah.
so, I took those classes and I'm like, I'm really into these classes, but I'm majoring in journalism. So, I'm just going to go through. But it wasn't until I got to my internship where I realized this is not what I want to do. And I really
Mm-hmm.
feel like there should be more integration of the actual work you're going to be doing after college
Yeah.
in college,
Right.
so that it's not at the very end of your program, because that
Mm-hmm.
internship was very eye-opening for me. And I was like,
Yeah.
this is not what I want to do at all, but I'm at the end. I'm not really sure what I
Mm-hmm.
want to do. So let me just graduate and get these student loans
Right.
settled.
Paid.
Yes. And I was like, let me just get up
Yes.
out of here because I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not about to
Mm-hmm.
be in here getting student loans while I figure it out. And so I
Yeah.
took a year out of school. I graduated, did some work in my field, doing some writing and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I did that for a while. And then also during that year, I did some substitute teaching. And in that time, I was introduced to this at-risk youth program that was a summer program. And I actually volunteered to do that, to work that the summer. And it was that program that really transformed my career path, because in that program, I was working with just young people who, you know, came from homes where maybe they didn't have a lot of support, or homes where there weren't a lot of that maybe you know, there were two parents in the home, or they were just you know, just growing up under the just tough and challenging conditions, right? And so I you know, spent time with those children, just encouraging them, holding them accountable, talking to them, giving them attention each day, and just started to seeing the transformation that happened in their attitude, their overall affect and mood. And I was just like, I love this. And I really looked forward to going to work every day, and it was early in the morning too. And I never like getting up early in the morning. And so I would go to it and go to the job site. And I just love like the transformation. And a couple of the teachers who were working the program were saying, you know, have you ever thought about being a therapist or a counselor, or you know, working in the school in that capacity? And I'm like, no, but you know, I really have been thinking about how can I do more of this, you know, in my life, just going forward. And so I started looking into programs. And so I returned back to the Hill at Western Kentucky University and pursued a degree in counseling. And fortunately, I was able to get right into the master's program because I had so many sociology classes and human behavior classes that it kind of transitioned and made me eligible to slide into the master's program. And so that's a thing. I didn't know it until I lived it. And so I got into the program, you know, did my years, finished in 2 years, graduated with a 4.0. You know, I'm trying to fast forward. This is such a journey. And, you know, graduated and started my career in Charlotte, North Carolina. I always tell people I just kind of went for it. I wanted an adventure. I wanted a new place. And so I was like, you know, I had never really been many places in my life at all. Growing up in Kentucky, I think I had been to like Indiana, Tennessee, Ohio, maybe Illinois, and hadn't really been a lot of places. So I literally went to a counseling conference in Charlotte, and I was like, huh, I can live here. So then I just had it in my mind that I'm going to go live there when I graduate. And I did. And I started my career in counseling, and then traveled the world doing counseling, and been doing counseling ever since. I think I moved to Charlotte in 2009. And just did counseling. And then, of course, coming back home after settling down from my wander years of being abroad and living in Europe and Asia, I literally settled down and said, you know, I want to provide space for people here in my community to come and heal and to work through their trauma and to get the support that they need, and not really be the voice to the voiceless and tell the stories of people, but help people to rewrite their stories and to overcome, you know, their surroundings and environments, and really be that encourager, you know, because this is where it all started in Louisville, where I found my passion for really just like pouring into people and seeing the transformation. So awesome. I think that was it. I think I got it all in that time.
You did.
Like, it's such a long journey. I'm like, how to make this kind of short so it's not like all night the whole live. But
no, it was perfect. It was perfect because I want young girls to see that, you know, even though you do go into counseling, you can still travel with it, because some people think it's just you know, one centralized, you know, job. You can't travel. I can't do anything. So can you talk about your travels just a little bit too?
Yes, absolutely. You know, I started off my career, I always told people you had to work my way up. So I started working in community-based counseling. So it was a tough job. You know, I was working with a wide range of individuals, really just figuring out, you know, who my ideal client was. And I was doing in-home counseling at that time. So here I am, country girl from Kentucky in North Carolina. At that time, you know, I'm saying it's like this, it was like a New York to me, you know? So I'm there. And I'm in North Carolina and just going into all of these neighborhoods, using my GPS to the max, and going into people's homes and providing care for families and really trying to restore unity within families and help to heal families so that they can function and thrive. And so I did that for a while. And then, of course, you know, with community-based work, it can be very draining because the caseloads are large, the hours are long. And so, you know, I was just like, okay, this can't be it. You know, I love what I do, but I'm exhausted. And so one of my colleagues at the time was telling me about an opportunity with the military, with the Department of Defense. And I was like, this sounds like not too good to be true. And honestly, I was very hesitant because I was like, so what? They, you travel to Europe and Asia. They take care of your accommodations. The pay was really nice. And I'm like, so
Yeah.
what's the, so I
Good
honestly, it
sketch.
was around the time of that movie. What is that movie? Taken.
Oh,
With about,
goodness.
yeah, girl, I
Yes.
thought this was like a
Yes.
human trafficking. And I was just like, I don't
Yeah.
know about this opportunity. I was honestly
Right.
scared. And of course, my family they haven't
Yep.
really traveled a lot of places. They were just kind of like, no, that sounds too good to be true. I don't know about it.
Right.
So there was a lot of doubt and a lot of fear surrounding me going.
Yeah.
But,
Of course.
faith in God, I was like,
Yeah.
I'm going to go because this is just, it can't be. If it came to me, it's for me. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
I went, and my first assignment actually was in Georgia. And then like my second assignment was like in Hawaii. And then I went to Germany and Italy and Japan, and I lived there for months at a time. And it was just a beautiful experience. Just, I feel like in that time I learned so much about myself and, just who I was and what really mattered to me during that time. And so it was a beautiful thing. And I got to serve the men and women of our military and help them through all of the transitions that go on, and all of the challenges that are just a part of their regular everyday life, being, just displaced from their families and friends and being abroad, and then, their service members, going off and being deployed, and now they're in another country. They don't speak the language, or raising kids and living lives. And it's a lot. It's a lot on them. And
it can be very taxing. So thank you to all our military service men and women and their spouses. We appreciate you guys' service.
Absolutely. Appreciate your service. This Veterans Day, so how
it
timely. So it was, and it gave me so much insight into the military. Like my grandfather fought in the Army, and so but I was little bitty at that time, and so I didn't have a lot of insight. But they really sacrificed so much to serve our country, and the challenges that they have as families, and the spouses who go there, and there's not usually work available for them, and they're just totally away from everything that they know. And so just being there to support them and support the children through being in a new place again and being the new kid, it was just really a beautiful experience. So personally, I grew so much, but then also got to pour into communities who really appreciated the help and support that was there. So it was a beautiful journey. So
that is wonderful. I know it was a once in a lifetime experience. I know you'll probably do it more, more traveling. But
yes. I call them my wander years. I was just wandering the world, living out of suitcase, living in hotels, and just exploring the world, and helping people, but just also learning so much about myself, just in that solitude and just time away to really only rely on myself as I navigated to other countries. I would travel a lot while I was in those countries and just really explore. So really learned a lot about myself. Wouldn't change it for anything. Went to some beautiful places.
Yeah. I love it. So I'm going to talk about a little something, be a little bit transparent here.
Sure.
I was recently sharing my testimony with someone. I'm not going to say her name because, confidentiality.
Yeah.
And, she thanked me for sharing my experience with me going to seeing a therapist and my dealing with depression and anxiety. And when she, okay, I'm trying not to cry. This is crazy. Okay, I'm not going to cry.
Tears are welcome with me.
But, I know.
This is what I do. Let it happen. Yes. Feel what you feel.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So one of the things that she was sharing with me, and I'm going to actually share a quote. She said, "My family doesn't exactly believe in therapy. I come from a very tough family, and my mother vocally said she doesn't believe in depression. How would you respond?" This is for you, Shonda. How would you respond to this young woman and to all the young women and just women, seasoned women listening to that right now? Like, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, sadly, this is so common that people make that first call for therapy, haven't ever had therapy. And they're just like, I don't even know how this works. My family doesn't even believe in therapy. Maybe I don't even really know if I believe, but, I had a friend, or I know someone, or I just took a risk because I don't know what else to do. And so I think historically, just, as I'm thinking, as women, as Black women, that sometimes that, generationally, it's like we're taught to push through. We're taught to just kind of work through it, get to the other side of it, pray about it. Faith is like a huge one. Sometimes I feel like, families, there's not a lot of support, or even, I say, support or ability sometimes. I think I always tell people do the best they can with the tools they have. So I think if you come from a generation of fighters, of really strong people who push through and just kind of got through things, worked through it, prayed about it, then that's all the advice that they really have to give you, because people can't help you navigate in territories they've never been. So I think sometimes when people talk about therapy, or their interest in that, and they come from a family that's really strong, I think it's usually based in a lot of faith, that like we just kind of, we pray about it and we move on, we make it happen, we get through. And I think for so long that has been a mantra, unfortunately, and people haven't given themselves permission to really feel what they feel. And gets help and support. I think there's a lot of shame around needing help, because the idea is that you should be strong and you should be able to figure it out. And you should be able to work through it. And it's kind of like, well, what if I can't? Then what supports are there? But if no one in your family or surrounding you has ever been in a situation like that, where they've reached out for help or asked for help or gotten support, then they don't really know how to tell you to navigate that. And so I will say that it's just very common, unfortunately, that people are just like, tough it out, get through it. And
we look at those women who have gone before us, and we think, okay, they made it through. My grandmother had 13 children. She did it. I can do it with just 2, this is not impossible. But there are days when I just feel so overwhelmed. I'm like, I don't know how my granny did it. And she did not go crazy like that. I don't know how she did that. But going through this life, I'm realizing that I do need to have an outlet. I do need to have, those coping mechanisms. I do need to have a therapist that I speak with regularly. It's not something.
Absolutely.
And I know Soka said, that's also in the Asian community. It is.
Yeah,
it's
certainly. I had an experience in Japan, actually, working there with the local people, because we're there supporting the military, but then we work alongside like local individuals who work on base. And that's one thing that I learned, and I had no idea about, like, at that time, Japanese culture and how therapy was really frowned upon. So I was talking to one of my colleagues, and he was just like, so you came here to like give therapy all over America, that they paid you to come here to give therapy to people? And he was just like, in my culture, we don't really talk about anything. It's just kind of like, you don't even bring it up. So like conversations aren't even happening. And one thing that I learned while I was in Japan is that the suicide rate is extremely high, because people do hold on to things, and they push them down and push them down until they can't keep them down anymore. And so, eventually those things come to the surface, and people are really suffering, because there very much is a culture that looks down upon asking for help, needing help, going to therapy. So that was something like I didn't know until I traveled to Japan, that was shared with me, and I started looking into it. And I'm like, wow, the suicide rates are high, and those are just only the reported rates, so how many people take their own lives, and families hide it, because of course, if asking for help is looked down upon, then certainly taking your own life in the culture is going to be looked down upon, or not going to be something anyone wants to talk about or own. And so that's in many cultures as well. But I'm glad that person said that, because I had no idea until I was living there, that I was like, wow, they hold on to that, and they don't share, and that's a sign of strength. Like, if I can do everything on my own and handle it all, and I think that for so many cultures, that's kind of the belief system, and it leads a lot of people to suffer in silence and to feel very hopeless.
We definitely suffer in silence. And I know one thing that Rhonda and I talked about last week is that very thing, suffering in silence. And there was a moment where she had to, take 3 days or 2 days to just lay in the bed and process what she was feeling. And, giving ourselves that time to be able to process, the time, and to be able to reflect, on what happened, not just sweep it under the rug, or just kind of go to the next thing, And if you don't have those family members, like you said, because generationally, I feel like, they did not have the tools to say, you can go to this person and talk about your problems. It's okay. Like, you don't have to go to church and smile and act like everything's all right. Because it's not you know.
Right. It's not. Yeah.
It's not gonna always
Yeah.
be I'm blessed and highly favored. It just ain't gonna always be like that.
Right. It's like, I'm not okay. And I love
Hmm.
the movement of it's okay to not be okay. The
Yeah.
movement of check on the strong friend, the movement of
Hmm.
just really seeking the help. And I think I'm definitely seeing a shift
Yes.
in the field of just more minority populations that,
Hmm.
maybe didn't once seek out therapy, seeking out therapy. So I
Right.
love when I get calls from people. And it's so common that I get calls from people who want to start therapy, and
Hmm.
it's maybe they're 40, 50 years old, or well into their
Hmm.
30s or even 20s, and they're talking about
Hmm.
traumas that they've been holding on to, never told a single soul since
Yes.
they were, trauma from like 10 years old, 12-year-olds,
Hmm.
abuse that has happened, just
Yeah.
hurt that they've been holding on to that they've never verbalized and
Hmm.
vocalized. And it's just like, wow, that had to be so heavy to hold that. And so I really try to
Yeah.
help people walk through that process, because definitely opening up, being
Being
vulnerable as
vulnerable.
a Black woman is challenging, and it's hard, because it's
Very
like,
much so.
even the world tells us, the world knows
Hmm.
strong Black woman, right?
Oh
And so
yeah.
who
Oh
am
yeah.
I to be vulnerable and to be crying and to talking
Hmm.
about my feelings, and
Hmm.
and letting people know and vocalizing my capacity. And I
Yeah.
think that's a big one, because it's like we're natural caregivers, and
Right.
the world looks at us to like take care and to nurture,
Hmm.
even as women,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Yeah.
how do we pour into ourselves? And I like what you said, like
Hmm.
to slow down enough to take care of
Yes.
ourselves. I was in a workshop
Exactly.
one time, and they said that we are the healing generation. We are the generation that's going to
Mm,
do the healing. And I
I
really
believe
see
that.
that, because there's more education, there's more awareness of like the
Yes.
impact of stress and mental
Hmm.
illness. And I think there's just more real conversations about mental
Absolutely.
health, how real
Hmm.
it is, the impact of it. So it's not just something
Hmm.
that people say and people make up.
Right.
It really has impact, and putting a name to things, I think, is
Hmm.
very empowering to people. Many
I
times
believe
people come
that.
to see me and they're like,
Yeah.
I've just been struggling with this, and I'm like, that's depression. That's
Yeah.
what that is. I was like, let me
Yeah.
let me read for you the definition
The
of the
definition.
DSM says this is what depression
Hmm.
is, and you're like all of these things. So you're
Hmm.
not going crazy, you're not losing your
Right.
mind. And I think people have
Right.
that perception, is that you have to
Hmm.
be going crazy to go to
Hmm.
therapy, but it's really about just getting support with whatever situation you're going through,
That is
and
so
allowing
true.
someone to hold your hand along the journey and help you navigate and figure some things out. That's what it is. And I
Exactly.
try to normalize that when I talk to people,
Yes.
because you don't have to be in a critical state to go to therapy. You can go to therapy if you're
Hmm.
having a hard time making a decision and it's causing
Yeah.
you to feel overwhelmed and you're not getting sleep about it. You can go to
Hmm.
therapy for that. There's
Yep.
no issue too small to go to
That's right.
therapy.
That
Yeah.
is so true. And I like when you said you have to put a label on things. I
Yes.
didn't know what childhood trauma was until I actually
Mm.
started my therapy journey a few years ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And can you explain to, people who are watching right now what childhood trauma
Yeah.
is, so that way if they
Yeah.
too may have experienced that, they can reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. So childhood
Yeah.
trauma can be so many things,
Yeah.
honestly. So childhood trauma can be any sort of abuse that you experience, any sort of
Mhm.
wrong, honestly, any wrong that was done to you. Sometimes childhood trauma could be, you were bullied all
Yeah.
throughout elementary school. So I think sometimes when
Hmm.
people think of childhood trauma, they think of typically any sort of like physical abuse. They think of
Right.
like molestations and things like that.
Hmm.
It could be developmental trauma, growing
Hmm.
up and not really having an outlet, not really having real support, maybe having parents that
Hmm.
were really, really busy and didn't really have time to sit down and have necessary conversations with you. I
Yeah.
remember being in a training and like that being disclosed to me, and I'm like, wow, I never really thought
Mhm.
about that as like a developmental trauma. So I think that
Yeah.
even today, there's more and more ways that people are identifying that they have experienced trauma, but it can look like so many things.
It can.
And so I think it's just anything that happens to you, you're in that childhood, adolescent, teen years that
Hmm.
developed and I mean shaped maybe who you
Who
became,
you are. Hmm.
and I always tell people we hold a lot of trauma in our bodies. So sometimes it
Hmm.
might be just the way we react in certain situations. That's a
Yeah.
trauma response, the way
Hmm.
that we show up in relationships, the way that we treat other people,
Right.
our attitudes, our motivations,
Yes.
those can all
Hmm.
be shaped by childhood trauma. And
Hmm.
so it's really getting to the root of that. And so as a part
Hmm.
of like therapy, typically when you start individual therapy, they will kind of dive into like your family history. So talking about
Hmm.
like, what was childhood like, and kind of getting
Yeah.
into those dynamics, and where do you fall in the family constellation? Were you the oldest child, middle child?
Mhm.
How
Oh
much
yeah.
responsibility did you
Birth order
have?
makes a difference.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm
definitely. The
realizing
way
that.
even
Yeah.
your birth order makes a
Yeah.
difference in like your childhood
Yeah.
experience. And
Mhm.
so there's
Mhm.
so many things. And so trauma is really defined by the individual that experiences it, but usually it's anything that has impacted you in such a way that there is a mental health impact or a physical
Mhm.
impact, something that happens in your body or mind whenever
Yeah.
you're in a situation, or just something that shapes you based on maybe a negative experience that you had in
Right.
life. And it's really about, sometimes it's not about the actual action, but it's like the belief that
Mm.
you come away with. So
Yep.
it's like we could experience the same exact things, and I could be
Mhm.
traumatized by it. You could just think, yeah, it was just a thing that happened. But so we all
Right.
experience things in different
Different.
ways. And
That is
so,
so true. And we
yeah,
process things differently. And people grow up in the
certainly,
same homes as, the
certainly.
same things were going on, same things were occurring, but it affected
Yeah,
one child differently than it did the
hmm,
other two or the other three.
certainly.
It's just
Yeah,
totally different. And
yeah.
can you explain what that would do to your relationships, whether it be with your supervisor or your
Hmm.
spouse or your
Yeah.
your business partner? How would that
Hmm.
those childhood traumas, if they're not dealt with, how
Yeah.
can those really almost demolish relationships, in a way?
Yeah, certainly. The biggest way that I think of right off the top of my head that I see is with trust. Just the ability to
Mm-hmm.
trust people, the ability to really let your guard down, to be vulnerable, to
Mm-hmm.
really allow yourself to be loved. If we're talking about romantic relationships,
Mm-hmm.
people might go into, if you grew up in a home where you witnessed a lot of violence, you could be overly aggressive. You could show up in the
Mm-hmm.
relationship being extremely timid and not really vocalizing your needs and concerns, because maybe growing up there was never space for your voice, and so then you enter relationships in that same mode of like, I don't really have a voice, and you kind of just go along
Mm-hmm.
with what other people want for you or want to
Mm.
do with you. And so
Yeah.
it could look like that in the workspace. It could look about like mood disorders. Sometimes people are like,
Mm.
I'm just moody and I'm just angry. And so a lot of people will call me and they're
Mm-hmm.
like, I have anger issues, and really we get to the core of that. Because really, I
Yeah.
always tell people anger is a secondary emotion. So anger is experience secondary. So what was that
Yeah.
first thing? The primary thing that
First.
happens usually is hurt. It can be
Mm-hmm.
disappointment,
Yes.
frustration.
Uh-huh.
It can be so many things before it gets to anger. But I think anger
Yeah.
is just like this. It's a comfortable emotion because it feels powerful,
Yeah,
doesn't feel vulnerable.
exactly.
It feels in charge. And
Uh-huh.
so it's like, I'm just angry, and sometimes you see
Mm-hmm.
behavioral issues in kids. You see
Mm-hmm.
like angry adults, just really rude, mean people, or people who just go out of their way to make someone else experience hard or to make someone else have a bad day. And so it might be that person at work, the person who's just always moody, the person just
Mm-hmm.
always have something to say. And so sometimes it's kind of like they get joy because if I can deflect and put my attention on everything else, I never really have to
Yeah.
deal with myself and what
Myself.
my
Right.
experience is and what I'm going through. So it can show
Mm-hmm.
up in a variety of ways, but it definitely can
Yeah.
shape how you show up for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if not dealt with properly, oh yeah, I see.
Yeah. I
I
see
always
some
say I'm
comments there.
moody. Yeah. And there's so many different emotions, and I'm learning this as well. I'm on a
Yeah.
learning curve
So,
right now,
sure.
but learning that, when you are, like you said, when you're angry, what is the root to
Hmm.
that? When you're
Yeah.
happy, what's the root to that?
Hmm. Hmm.
When you're stress eating, what's the root to that? So,
Yes.
and then
Uh-huh.
even your emotions, like when you
Hmm.
say I'm scared, I'm fearful, well, you can go a little deeper in that as
Yeah,
well.
deeper. What is that fear? Unpack that
Hmm.
fear, label that
Yep.
thing. Yeah, because
Hmm.
sometimes we operate in fear and we don't really even know what we're afraid of. We just know
Hmm.
we just don't like the way that it feels and it's uncomfortable or it's
Yep.
scary. And so when you really unpack that, I was literally having that conversation today with someone, just like when you unpack that, what is that fear really? Fear of
Mm.
failure, where does that come from? Where,
Yeah.
when's the first time you felt like a failure? So usually
Hmm.
that's where we go. It's like, when's the
Yep.
first time that you had this emotion so intensely that you don't want to experience it again? And you've kind of
Hmm.
shaped your life around not experiencing that again. So you just live life in avoidance mode,
Avoidance. That is so
Yeah.
true. And there was
Yeah.
something else I was going to say about that, but I forgot what it was. Ah, goodness. I forgot what it was.
Yeah, it
It was
happens.
something else. I know. It was something
Happens to me
else.
every day. Sometimes mid-session,
Yes.
I'm like, it's gonna come back. It's gonna
Right.
come
It like
back.
it's right there. It was right
Yeah.
there. But yes, trauma does shape how you show
It
up. I
does.
totally
It
agree with that.
does.
I
It
totally,
does. And when
totally
it's
agree with
not
that.
dealt with, sometimes it's even hard to put a finger on.
Hmm.
And I see it a lot with children, again, I've worked with all age ranges, and I started my career working with children. And usually when there was like a child that was like oppositional, defiant disorder, that was their diagnosis, or a child with ADHD or
Hmm.
ADD, those are common diagnoses. And I think when you look at a child, it's like, oh, they have a hard time focusing. They're not paying
Hmm.
attention in class. They go against everything I say. And then when you really dig deeper and again, get to that underlying layer,
Hmm.
perhaps at home is violent.
Right.
Maybe home is, they don't have much attention given to them. Maybe,
Hmm.
their lights are turned off, and every night mom
Hmm.
and daddy's fighting. And so they're in
Yep.
this, they're in hyper vigilant mode. So they can't focus in school
Right.
because they're thinking about, are the lights going to be on when I get there?
Yeah. Am I gonna have something to eat when I get
Is mama
home?
okay? Is she
Yeah.
going to be there? Who's going to get me? Who's even going to be home? Is somebody going to be home when I
Right.
get there? So when you have
Mm.
all of those things functioning and thinking and going on in your mind at the same time, it's very hard to function and really show up as your best self. So you can't
Yeah.
expect a young person to show up with the best attitude, focus
Hmm.
in class, prepared for school and all those things, if all of these things are
Hmm.
going on and they're not being dealt with. And
Right.
so,
Do
yeah,
you
they
think
have to
teachers are
be
prepared for that
dealt
though? Do
with.
you think teachers are properly trained to, see those
Yeah,
signs? I know teachers have a lot of responsibility, like
they do.
they
Bless
do
their
everything,
hearts.
but
Yeah,
do you feel
yeah,
like they are sometimes missing the mark, or do you feel that they do a really good job, with seeing these
yeah,
signs? Have you
yeah.
seen that in your, like, have any children come to you and said, well, my teacher missed this, or a parent come to you and said
Yes.
that?
Yeah, definitely. That happens often. I think there
Hmm.
are some teachers that are, they're really culturally competent also.
Hmm.
That's a big piece of it. Is just
Yeah.
understanding that every home is not like the home you personally grew up in. And so
Right.
these kids are dealing with a lot of things that aren't
Hmm.
necessarily written down in bios about them. And so
Yeah.
you really got to get to know the child and know them. So I think it's getting better. I know JCPS here, they do a lot of trainings for teachers and
Mhm.
cultural competency and understanding like family dynamics. I know people who work with like younger children and they do home visits. So that of course gives you
Mm.
more insight into home dynamic, like what's going
Yeah.
on in the home, who
What's
lives
going
in the
on?
home, because
Yeah.
these are not things that teachers typically know. So I know there are
Hmm.
efforts to just become more in tune with what that child's individual experience,
Okay.
so they can know like how those experiences might be showing up in the classroom. But then I
Hmm.
think definitely I've seen teachers where they kind of just have it in their head, little Johnny ain't paying attention, he's disrupting my classroom, he does everything that I don't want
Hmm.
him to do, so he's oppositional defiant. So sometimes whenever I worked in schools, I would get a little annoyed with teachers who would just like slap labels, because I'm like, sis, you got no training to say what you said. I don't care how long you've been in the classroom. Things
Right.
could look similar, but every child is
Hmm.
not the
It's
same. So
not the
every
same.
kid acting out is not because
Hmm.
he just wants to, be disruptive in your classroom. There might be a bigger
Right.
thing going on. And typically younger people, there's so many goals of misbehavior. There's like power and
Hmm.
control and attention. And so usually when you dig
Yep.
deep enough, it's rooted in one of those. So it's kind of like, if I
True.
feel powerless at home, I'm gonna come to school and I'm gonna disrupt this whole class
Hmm.
and I'm gonna
So that
show
now
out.
taking
Or
power.
if I don't get
Yeah.
any attention at home, if I show out and Miss
Hmm.
So-and-so call my mama, okay, so now my mama's talking to me, my mama's giving me
Hmm.
attention, I'm getting punishment. And even though it's not the positive attention you would think a child would want, it's
But it's
attention.
what they
And
want.
any attention to a
Right. Yeah.
child is
What they're
attention.
getting.
So
Exactly.
they do what
Exactly.
works. So kids do what
Hmm.
work, adults do what works. So
That's
yeah.
very true. That's very
Yeah.
true. And kind of shifting a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So when you hear the word trigger, a lot of people don't
Mm-hmm.
know what that is either, And again, I'm
Yeah.
just kind of throwing stuff out because I'm learning this. I know you have
Yeah.
studied this, but what does
Yeah.
a trigger mean for someone?
Yeah. So a trigger is anything that happens that creates an emotional or physical response in your body. So like I said,
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of work with helping people to understand that connection between their mind and their body. And
Mm-hmm.
so just anything that happens that causes a physical or mental reaction in you. So something, happens that maybe reminds you of something that was traumatic to you
Mm-hmm.
potentially, or something that, you know, is something you want to be, something you want to avoid, something maybe you're running from. And so something happens and it reminds you of that, and you don't want no part of it, you
That's right.
know? And so it could
Yeah.
be rooted in trauma and
Mm.
experiences, but it could also be like just your body. It's kind of like if someone was to like
Mm.
slap something really loud, a person who grew up in a violent community might
Mm-hmm.
duck. Another person
Mm.
might just be like, what was that sound? So again,
Right.
we all have different experiences. The same
Yeah.
thing can happen in a room with you and I. We're going to respond very differently to
Yeah.
that same thing that's happening. So that's a trigger. It's like a life experience that you
Mm.
had, that whenever this thing happens, it
Mm-hmm.
emotionally or mentally impacts you in some way. It kind of wakes
Mm-hmm.
you up. It wakes up your body, wakes up your mind to be like, I got to be on alert. I got to get up
Yes.
out of here.
Uh-huh.
And, you
Fight or
know, I
flight.
always, yes, fight or flight.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like, this ain't it. I got to get up out
Mm-hmm.
of here.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, yes, yes. So,
Absolutely.
let's see. I have another question.
Sure.
What
I love all
steps?
the
'Cause I know
comments.
you.
I'm trying to read them all. I'm like,
Yeah, let's do that.
there's so
Thanks.
many. I'm like, I can't
Yes.
keep up with them. But it's a
Yes.
good engaged audience. So
I love
that's
it.
always a
Thank you
beautiful thing.
guys. Yes. Mandy, I think teachers are
Yeah.
overwhelmed with responsibilities and can sometimes miss opportunities to be in tune with their students. Yep, that's very true.
Certainly. Yeah, because
Yep,
they're pushing like, yeah, so hats off to teachers. Like I
yep.
substitute taught for like, I don't know, maybe 6 months, and I was like, this ain't it, you know? So in my year of like figuring out my life, I knew
Yeah.
teaching was not one of them, because I would really go home like super stressed, and I never had to see those
Mm.
kids again in my life, because I knew I was not going to accept that assignment when they offered it again. But you know, I would go into the classroom, you know, optimistic, but it was just challenging. So yeah, hats off to
Yeah.
teachers. I have several friends that are teachers. I know the struggles, all the
Hmm.
pulls of them as the administration pulls at them, the parents pulls at them, the
Yep.
children need them, and so it's a
Hmm.
lot. So yeah, hats
Yes.
off to any teacher. You all deserve raises, and all
Absolutely.
deserve raises and flowers and
Absolutely.
trips. Yeah, because
Yes. All
yeah,
of the things.
it's a
All of the
lot. And someone
so,
mentioned something about label. So yeah, so sometimes children get labeled
ah.
and improperly labeled, and then that label
Hmm.
follows them. So I always think that's a really,
Yeah.
really sad and disheartening thing when someone gets that diagnosis earlier on, because
Hmm.
some teacher really pushed, or maybe, you know, they went to someone who kind of was like, oh, I've seen this before, ADHD, or I've seen this before, learning disability,
Hmm.
I've seen this before. And really it's like you never really got to what was presenting underneath all of that, that was
Underneath.
making that child show up and behave and act the way that they did, or, you know, impeding
Exactly.
on their ability to like learn and understand or read or whatever it
Hmm.
is.
Hmm.
So yeah.
And all of those things really impact, okay, childhood trauma, even though the triggers, they really impact how you parent if these
Certainly.
things aren't dealt with, you know,
Yeah,
because then you're kind of
definitely.
working through and still trying to parent at the same time, but working through your own childhood things
Certainly.
that shape, like you said, that shaped you, whether it
Mm-hmm.
be
Yeah.
the things that may have happened in school, whether you were bullied, or
Yeah.
things that happen at home. I mean, I like what you said too about
Mm-hmm.
the parents being too busy, because a lot of
Certainly.
times in our community, our parents got to work. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
everybody's got to go to
Like
work. Mm-hmm.
exactly, because my dad worked and then he refereed, you know, at night sometimes. So sometimes we just see
Yeah.
him sometimes on the weekend. So
Yeah.
that is very true. Like you really sometimes don't see your parents, but thank God for the family that is
Yeah.
there, that, you know, that
Mm-hmm.
was there
Mm-hmm.
to support.
Certainly.
So
Yeah, it definitely can show up in your parenting for sure. If you have some
mm,
stuff that's not taken care of. I know
mm,
sometimes I see it, and sometimes, and I read something the other day and I was like, wow, that's powerful. But it was just talking about, it was an article, and I think a mom was just talking about how she was having such a hard time being supportive of her daughter's relationship with her father, because she never had that. And she was
mm,
triggered in so many ways,
mhm,
him being dad, you know, and doing all these things and prioritizing his daughter and that treatment. And she
mhm,
realized how not having her father around, how that really impacted her. But it wasn't until she
mhm.
had children, because
Did she
sometimes, you know,
realize that?
not having the dad in the home can be normalized sometimes in the
Yeah,
Black community. So it's like, okay,
yeah.
your daddy wasn't there, my daddy wasn't either. But it
Mhm,
impacts everyone in different ways. Again, we can have the same thing happen, but we have total different experiences. We have different belief systems about why it happened and how it impacted us. And so I just thought that that article was just so transparent, because I've seen that in therapy where maybe an adult person I'm working with, their child is really wanting a relationship with their dad, and maybe they're no longer with the dad. And I feel like there's like this push away of dad because their dad wasn't around, and it's like, well, we're not together, so he don't got to come around. And there's not really a lot of support for that relationship growing into what it can be. And so I think different things like that. So when you said like how, I guess, childhood trauma and our own stuff that's not dealt with can show up, it made me think about the article that I just read, where this woman was just feeling really triggered by the relationship her daughter was having with her biological father, but she just didn't know how to deal with it because she had never had that, and realized, wow, maybe I'm not okay with my dad not being around, and I missed out on this, and I didn't know I missed out on it until now that I'm living it in my own home and seeing this in my daughter and my partner.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So it can show up. So, you know, as much as we try to push it down and push through, and, you know, I always tell people you can have Jesus and a therapist. You can have both, okay? And I think churches are doing a better job of normalizing therapy and having additional supports outside of your prayers and your faith and your belief system, whatever that might be. Yeah.
Exactly. Have you had those clients, and I know you can't really talk about your clients, but have you had experiences to where the individual is so involved in the church, that's all they know, that's all they grew up hearing, that so it's not that they're butting up against you, but it's hard for them to accept some of the things that you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, sometimes people will start therapy and, you know, their belief system, I'm trying to encourage them to different coping skills and things to do. And they're maybe might be resistant to it because it's like, well, I already prayed about it. So they kind of feel like maybe I don't have to do anything extra. Like, so this stuff you're trying to have me to do, I already prayed about it. I gave it to God. And I'm like, okay, you know, and nothing's wrong with that. But there's also some measurable steps that we can take together to get you maybe closer to where you want to be. I think the biggest thing that I've seen when like that faith is such a huge part of someone's life and they come into therapy, sometimes there's a lot of shame and guilt around even being in therapy with me. And so it's just kind of like, they're kind of beating themselves up. I don't know why I need so much help with this. I don't know why I'm not getting it yet. So there's like this pressure that they feel to be okay before the work has even begun. And so it's kind of like, well, if I'm praying about it, I don't know why I'm still struggling with it. And so it's just like this self-defeating and self-fulfilling prophecy of like, I'm not going to get better, because it's like they don't want to really do the work because they also are just struggling with why God's not acting or working yet on my behalf. And so
but it's a process. A lot of times you have to go through the process because it didn't just happen overnight. You know, you can't just say, okay, God, take it away. Yeah, a lot of times He will, but a lot of times you still have to go through, you know, that journey, that process of really healing, digging deep, getting to the root of those traumas, those triggers. What are they? What is this? You know?
Yeah, definitely. All those things that shape you. I love the most beautiful part of therapy I love is that helping people make connections between why they act, feel, do, show up in the world the way that they do, and making connections to experiences they've had, and like so many beliefs that they've been holding on to that don't serve them, that they have to unlearn. But they have to unpack it and unlabel it and own it, the fact that they've been kind of marching to this soundtrack that is not supportive of who they want to be, who they want to become, and where they're going. And so, you know, sometimes it's generational. Like with my family and people in my family, we always do this, you know, and sometimes it's like unlearning that, you know, it's like, okay, just because mom and them did that doesn't mean that you necessarily need to do it in that same way. And I think, sometimes there's trauma that's like generational. So it's like my mama went through it, I went through it, and it's kind of like a rite of passage in a way until they learn that like it doesn't have to be that. You don't have to pass that down generationally. You don't have to pass that down. But if we don't ever deal with our stuff, then we're destined to pass it down because we might not even have the awareness that it's problematic behavior, or, you know, is keeping us and not serving us in the way that we think it is.
That's true. And those
So, yeah.
generational, because you have in the church generational curses, but
Mm-hmm.
then in therapy,
Mm-hmm.
they teach you about generational patterns,
Yeah,
which are,
certainly.
it's so aligned, you
Yeah,
know, and that's what
so
people in the
much.
church don't realize. Yeah, that it's
Yeah.
everything you're learning in the church, you
Mm-hmm.
also are learning because we're spirit and we're flesh. You know what I mean? Like we're
Mm-hmm.
not just walking
Yep.
around in our
Yeah.
heavenly bodies yet. You know?
Right.
One day we will, but
Absolutely.
we're not yet. So we still have to feed
Yeah.
our spirit man and feed, you know,
Mm-hmm.
work on our flesh as well.
Yeah.
And that's what
Yeah,
it really
certainly.
helps. That's what therapy really helps with,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
absolutely. Bringing it all in together. And I
Yes.
always tell people I welcome spirituality into my work that I do. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
market myself. I know there's people out there that market themselves as Christian counselors.
Mm-hmm.
I always feel like the biggest impact is like, believe what you want to believe because that's going to shine through in the work
Mm-hmm.
that you do. But I think
Yeah.
sometimes by labeling it that, that's going to attract some people, but it's also
Mm-hmm.
going to push some people away. So I always tell
Yeah.
people, whatever you believe in, we can incorporate it into the clinical work that we're doing here. Because if that's
Yeah.
going to make it more accessible to you
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, your family, then that's what we want to do. So that's what we
Exactly.
do at Sims Council. We incorporate whatever your belief system is. We're going to put it on this treatment plan. We're going to come up with
Love
some
it.
clinical evidence-based treatment plan that's going to help you get closer where you want to be and
That
it
is
makes
fun.
sense of it all, you know, and really live the life you've been imagining. I think so many of us just like, you know, I want to be the kind of person that does this. I want to be the kind of
Mm-hmm.
person that is able to get up in the morning and do this. And I hear that so often and I'm like, well, what stops you? Like what's the
Yeah.
barriers? What's getting in your way? And so much of therapy is that helping people to
Yes.
identify the barriers,
The
whether it's a
barriers.
people, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
people in their lives, a
Mm-hmm.
mindset,
Yeah.
a family, like I said, generational pattern. It's like, well, we
Mm-hmm.
always just do this, you know, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
that's not serving you. We got to let that go. We got to release
Mm-hmm.
that. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, I love helping people connect the dots and understand and have those aha moments and
Mm-hmm.
recognize that even though I've been doing it this way, I don't have to continue. I don't have to
Exactly.
continue to, and just to see the transformation in their mindset and their
Mm-hmm.
life, you know, just overall quality of life changes when your mind changes.
When your mind
So
changes.
yeah, yeah.
That's so true. Can you
Change
talk
your
about some of the
thinking.
services? Yes.
Yeah, change your thinking, change your
Change your
life.
thinking, change your life.
It's so real. And I was like, you know, excuse me, I need to add calm your bodies, calm your mind, you know, because I do a lot of
Mm.
yoga integration into the
Yeah.
work that I do. And I think so many people have just been pushing through for so long just to find a moment of stillness to reflect and ask
Yeah.
yourself, you know, what is it that I need? Even if you never go to therapy, making that a practice of just
Yeah.
asking yourself, tuning into yourself, asking yourself,
Mm-hmm.
what do I need right now
What do
to
you
be my
need?
best self? What do I need right now to be okay? And just
Mm-hmm.
sitting with that in a silent room and just sitting with that at that
Yeah.
question and really doing that soul searching. Because I think sometimes we get so busy doing and pushing
Mm-hmm.
through and making it happen and completing tasks and meeting deadlines that we don't really tune in to what we need. And it's
Yeah.
so much, if you neglect what you need for so long, then that's
Mm-hmm.
when the mental illness is like, it's unavoidable. That's when your
Yep.
boss is calling you to the office like, what's going on? That's
Yeah.
when your partner's like, I don't know if I can do this. That's when you're
Mm-hmm.
crying and you're having trouble sleeping at night and you
Mm-hmm.
know, you're just having a hard time focusing. And that's when
Right.
you've tuned out of what you need. And so it's so important to
Mm-hmm.
just really tune into what you need and to ask yourself that on a
Mm-hmm.
consistent basis. So, you know, all right, what do I need to be doing to be my best self?
Exactly.
So,
And I know
yeah.
for Black women on the job, we do have that label sometimes as the angry Black woman, you know,
Yeah.
because we're
Yeah.
not dealing with our emotions properly
Mm-hmm.
because we don't even
Mm-hmm.
know where they're coming from or what they
Mm-hmm.
are, you know, so many
Yeah.
different emotions that we can have besides being happy,
Certainly.
angry, or sad. You know, it's
Certainly.
different
Yeah.
levels of
Mm-hmm.
those emotions and where they come from. So,
Yeah.
and I hope that, you
Absolutely.
know, even employers will be able to see now that mental health is coming to the forefront, will
Mm-hmm.
be able to see that, you know, there's not always the angry Black woman. Maybe she's going through something at home. You know, you have no
Yeah.
idea
Yeah.
what the issues are with
Mm-hmm.
that. So what
Mm-hmm.
services does your
Yeah.
agency provide? We want to talk about that too
Yeah.
so people know.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, my practice is Sims Counseling and
Mhm.
Consulting. We're located in Louisville, Kentucky, and we provide individual therapy. We provide group counseling. We provide couples therapy. We do a lot of premarital work. We
Mhm.
do just couples maintenance work. I always tell people, no matter how long you've been married, there's still some stuff
Mhm.
you can figure out and learn and work through. And so we do couples. We work with
Mhm.
teens. We don't do any young children in the practice, but we do work with
Okay.
teens, couples, adults. We do some
Mhm.
groups every now and then. We're running a teen group currently, just helping
Mhm.
teens label emotions, work
Yeah.
through, all the stresses, all the transition children are going through right now in general with
Mhm.
like COVID-19 and
Yeah.
just all the transitions and changes in the world,
Mhm.
just helping them navigate that. We offer yoga. So we do
Mhm.
offer right now yoga, virtual yoga. We used to offer in-person classes, but of course with COVID-19, a lot of that has changed. So we do
Mhm.
virtual yoga on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We do mindfulness workshops. We haven't did one of those in a while. We might be doing one of those in the spring.
Yeah.
So yeah, just any sort of therapy, any sort of
Mhm.
psychotherapy we do provide. And then we
And
have the yoga services and
oh,
groups.
that's good.
And I think
Yeah.
that's it. That's all that we're currently offering. Yes.
Okay. And I wanted to talk about the mindfulness. A lot of people
Yes.
do not even
Yes.
understand
Yes. Yes.
the
Yes.
greatness that mindfulness does for you. I mean, it really puts you in a state
Yeah.
of serenity, of calm,
Mm-hmm.
because you're
Mm-hmm.
really centering yourself. And at first, when my,
Yeah.
when my therapist presented it to me, I thought, is she trying to get me to meditate on some? What is this? You
Absolutely.
know.
A lot of people think that. A lot of people think that. So it doesn't necessarily mean meditation. It can be
Mhm.
a lot of different things. It can look like a lot of different things. But ultimately, mindfulness is just really intentional awareness of yourself and your surroundings in the present moment without judgment. So I could be
Mhm.
able to sit in this room and just take a moment to just take in my surroundings and just really look around the room. Maybe I'm looking for a particular color. Maybe I'm looking for a
Mhm.
texture. Maybe I'm just like taking in the room and just seeing what I notice and what my eyes are drawn to. What you're
Mhm.
doing in that moment is you're giving your brain a break. You're giving yourself
Yep.
permission to tune out of whatever it's tuned into. And
Mhm.
oftentimes our brains are tuned into a lot. I
A
tell
lot.
people if you've ever attempted to meditate or just have a moment of silence or even going into prayer and your mind
Mhm.
jumping all over the place, you're thinking
All
about what
over.
I'm about to eat later. You're thinking about what I got to do when I get up off
Yeah.
my knees. Or, I'm thinking about what I have to do tomorrow. What happened
Yes.
earlier. What
Yes.
they really meant when they said that to me
Right.
earlier at work. You're thinking about all these things. And so
Yeah.
what the mind tends to do is it kind of travels. So we're just going along our
Mhm.
day and it's either thinking too far into the future, and sometimes that can present and kind of create a little bit of anxiety because you're kind of getting ahead of
Mhm.
yourself. You're worrying about stuff that hasn't even happened yet.
Hasn't
But if your
happened yet.
brain has a tendency to do that, sometimes I see
Mhm.
that people struggle with anxiety. But then
Yeah.
sometimes your brain kind of dwells in the past and it replays situations that you no longer have control over,
Mhm.
situations that have already happened. They happen the way they happen, but if you keep
Mhm.
dwelling that, and maybe perhaps you don't like the way you showed up in that, you dwell in that, then that it's kind of like a snowball effect. That emotion's going to grow and become bigger and bigger the
Mhm.
more you visit, that. And so mindfulness, I think, is really becoming more of a buzzword, and it's really more people are talking about it because I think more than
Mhm.
ever we're realizing how our multitasking, do everything at once culture, um, set all these goals for the future mindsets and culture society is not
Yep.
working for us because it's breaking
Right.
us all feel overwhelmed, feel very
Yep.
stressed, feel
Yep.
very depressed, inadequate,
Yes.
insufficient. Like we just feel all these things
All
because
the
we're just doing
things.
too much. So
Yeah.
mindfulness is really about just really slowing down and just noticing, having
Mhm.
awareness of where you are, how you're feeling, what's going on in your body. What am I
Mhm.
thinking about right now? Taking in your surroundings, just really tuning out of all the stuff going on in your head and being present
Mhm.
in the moment. So it's about
Yeah.
presence. It's
Mhm.
really about presence. And there's so much peace in the present
It
moment. And I
is.
always tell people the perfect example of this is like if you're having a really good day, right? And
Mhm.
then text messages kind of work like those intrusive thoughts. So if a text message comes through and it's not so much good news, you go from having a pretty good day to now worried, upset, angry about whatever
Yeah.
just came through on that text. And that's kind of the same way
Mhm.
thoughts work. So if we allow
Mhm.
ourselves to be in our thoughts too much, we could be
Mhm.
having a good day like right now. Like I'm on this
Right.
live with you having a good conversation. But if my mind wants to
Mhm.
go to all these things I got to do next week, then it's like I can become very overwhelmed. Right now, in this moment, I'm upset about something that hasn't happened yet. And so when you're not aware of that happening as often as it does, then you can just kind of show up in a way that's like very anxious or very overwhelmed, or you find yourself being irritable and snappy. And it's because you're stressed. Oftentimes those types of behaviors are stress responses. But if we were able to just be here now and have the conversation and be present, then we don't have to feel all those feels that would come if we allow our mind to go there, if we allow our mind to go here. And so mindfulness, there's so many ways to incorporate it. Sometimes I have clients, I tell them, you know, when you go home, I really want you to just like count how many trees are on your drive home. And because that's going to give your brain permission to not get into that cycle of what you about to do as soon as you hit that door when you get home, how many things you got to do, wonder if these kids are up and in the shower, if they got a bath yet. You know, you get there before you get there. Your mind oftentimes arrives before you do. And so if we could just be more present on that ride home and just take in our surroundings, even if you were just practice it tomorrow, you'll probably notice so many new establishments you never noticed. Like, how long your Wendy's been there? How long that juice bar been there? You know, I never noticed that. And you've been on the same route. It's kind of that sensation when you drive and you pull up home and you're like, how in the heck did I get here? Because you were so in your thoughts, you were so in your head that you didn't even notice the route. You didn't even notice the journey. You don't even remember if you ran every stoplight or if you ran the stop sign, if anybody was on the road with you, because you're so in your head. And I think that's the perfect example of what's happening on a daily basis. And so if you're not aware of that, you can find yourself really emotionally upset and not really be able to label it or pinpoint it. And so anything that you can do in your day, I know the Apple Watch is always telling me to breathe, and a lot of people just like click that off, like, what? I ain't got time to breathe. Like, you don't got a minute to breathe. Okay,
right, exactly.
If you don't have a minute to breathe, we're in bad shape. So if you have an Apple Watch right now, next time your watch tells you to breathe, please breathe. Take a moment.
Breathe.
Take a moment and just like
deep breaths.
Be with self. Deep breath, deep breathing. Oh, don't even get me started on deep
breath. I know.
The power of breath. Oh my God. It's the first thing we do when we're born, the last thing we do when we pass away and transition. And so it's that in itself, knowing that in itself speaks to the power of what breath is. And so you've got to tune into that. Even if you could just do some deep inhales and exhales, you know, I'm always teaching breathing techniques to people, but anything that would just get oxygen flowing through your body. And, you know, anytime you increase the oxygen flow to your brain, it creates a level of clarity and calm. So even if you can just say 1, 2, 3, hold and release, if you can just do that a couple of times, that's going to benefit you more than maybe that Snicker bar that you want to eat as an emotional response to what you're feeling. You know, because that Snicker's you're going to be mad you ate it later, but it's going to light up your brain in all the great ways while you're eating it. After you're not going to feel good, but breathing will help. Breathing will certainly help you feel a little bit better on those really mentally cloudy moments.
Exactly. So, and like you said, just being aware of where you are. Let me see Yolanda go past an exit. I've done that before. Yes. Red light, unfortunately.
You're like, where am I going? My car is driving itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rhonda, and I've been to a point where I didn't think it mattered. Oh, what I needed. That's true. Because sometimes we do, Rhonda, we do put, you know, others first before ourselves. And we don't take the time to say, okay, let me take care of me. Let me do my deep breathing, or, you know, take the time to do that.
Absolutely. I always tell people you can't pour from an empty cup. Is not just a cute Instagram post. It's real life. Okay.
It's real.
You cannot pour from an empty cup. So if you're not replenishing yourself, you're not going to be the best coworker. You're not going to be the best mom, the best partner, the best sister, brother, mom, you know, daughter, you know, son. You're not going to be able to show up in that capacity because you've got to take care of yourself. It's kind of like you got to, it's kind of like when you're on the plane and they tell you even put your mask on first. So even though no matter how much you want to save everybody on the plane that you're sitting beside, you've got to put your mask on first, because if not, you're going to pass out. And so to avoid that and that exhaustion, you have to put your mask on first. And then that's when you can go and help and support other people. But you got to secure your mask first. And that's so important. But
And how
yeah.
would you encourage people to do that practically,
Mm-hmm.
to take care of
Yeah.
themselves first? What does that look like? You know,
Yeah.
taking care of me first.
Yeah, definitely. I think self-care has been on, it's become a buzzword too.
Yeah.
And oftentimes self-care is equated to manis, pedis, and
Right.
massages. And many pedis, massages are amazing, but
They
they are
are.
not all that self-care is made of. Okay.
Yeah.
And so self-care is the word no. It's a boundary.
Mm,
It's a boundary. So your
good.
use of the word no and I can't and
Mhm,
not right now, and knowing
mhm,
your own capacity for helping other people and showing up and committing to things, that's
yeah,
self-care. So you
mhm,
have to know your capacity. So not pouring from a place of depletion, but really
mhm,
pouring from a place of abundance, and fullness. And
mhm.
so knowing that, so if like I don't have anything to give, then I have to honor
Yeah,
that and say no and set
yeah.
boundaries. So that's self-care. So that's number one.
Mhm,
I'm big on boundary setting, and
yeah.
people just really saying what they need and knowing their
Mhm,
capacity to help and support. Resting, taking naps. If you can get a
mhm.
nap in. I know sometimes as a
Yes.
mom, naps can be a struggle, but you can
Right.
get in a nap. You can get in a
Yes.
nap, getting good sleep,
Good
not
sleep.
being
Yep.
on up all night scrolling on your
Oh,
on your
Lord, no.
phone, setting some
Mhm.
healthy boundaries around technology, setting healthy boundaries
Yes.
about your availability. If you know
Mhm.
people are going to call you late at night, maybe setting up some parameters around how late am I going to take phone calls?
That's true.
How long am I going
Yeah.
to be on this computer? When I
Mhm.
think of self-care, I think of boundaries first. I used to think of all the
Mm.
massages and all that stuff, but it's
Yeah.
really just boundaries, because I think
Boundaries.
people, and especially I work with a lot of women, a lot of Black women, and
Mhm.
it's about them doing the most for other people and then just kind of
Mhm.
feeling depleted as a result, and then also feeling like they don't have the support that they need, and feeling like, well,
Mm.
if I'm always the helper, this is the biggest one that I see. If I'm always the helper and
Mm.
I'm always the person that everyone comes to, where's my support? And to the point
Yeah.
where they feel like a burden if they were ever to need
Go
something.
to
So I'm
somebody.
like, so you're saying you can help everybody else, but no one can help you. And
Right.
so that's the biggest thing that I help people unlearn when they come
Mhm.
into therapy.
Mhm. Yes.
But practically, I think it's setting boundaries. I think it's, getting proper rest. I think it's
Mhm.
choosing good foods for your body, foods that
Oh,
really
yes.
nourish your body and not
Mhm.
just fill you up real quick.
Right.
Really taking time for that. And prioritizing the things that matter the most to you. So if you
Mhm.
like to read and like you've been so busy doing all this other stuff, you don't have time to read, making some
Mhm.
time to read, really thinking about what do I need. Again, that checking with self, I think that's a self-care practice, the checking in
Mhm.
with self. What do I need right now?
Yeah.
And what is it that I wish I had more of? What could I use
Mm.
more of or less of in my life right now? I think that's always a good question to ask yourself. So like, maybe I need more sleep, maybe I need less time on social media, maybe I need
Mhm.
less time, sometimes doing good stuff. Maybe I need less time at church because I'm like doing
Mhm.
so much at church that I don't have
Right.
time to like take care of other things, and other things are being neglected, or any sort of
Mhm.
organization um, or commitments that you're making. And
Yeah.
so I think the most practically, it's just knowing your capacity and
Yeah.
making adjustments in your schedule and with your time. I think that's the
Mhm.
biggest gift that you can give yourself. Drinking water,
Totally agree.
anything. It's really, I think it looks individual to each person, but I think the biggest thing I see is people doing too much for other
Mhm.
people and not checking in with themselves about what they need.
Themselves. That's so
And even though
true.
I'm a therapist and I talk about it day in and day night, I have to check myself. I tell
Yeah.
people therapists are people too. So just because I
Right.
say this all day long doesn't mean that I'm
Mhm.
like living it all day long. And so I
Mhm.
have to reset myself. And there's
Yeah.
even times where I'll be in session and I'll be telling someone something and I hear it. It kind of echoes.
Mm.
And I'm like,
Mm.
you got to know your
Felt that.
capacity. You got to
Yeah.
say no to that, even though that's a
Yeah.
great thing, and that would be a good look for your career. It's kind of like, do you have the capacity? And absolutely not. And
Right.
so knowing your
That's
limits.
true. That is so
Yeah.
true. And yes, you're
Yeah.
right, Rhonda. Learning to use the word no. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's a
I'm
complete
learning that.
sentence.
It
It's
is.
a complete sentence. It doesn't,
It
I
is.
think sometimes as women, we feel like we
Mhm.
have to explain and provide this explanation.
Mhm.
And maybe
Mm.
men feel that too, but I feel like with women,
Maybe.
I hear that the most. And
Yeah.
it's just kind of like, no, you don't, I'm not going to be able to do that right now.
Exactly.
You can say no a lot of ways. You can get creative. Like, no, I don't think I have the capacity for that. Or no,
Yeah.
I don't know where I would fit that in my schedule. No,
Mhm.
you can say a little bit more, but it doesn't require explanation
Right.
necessarily.
Uh-oh. Can you say something else, Sean? I think you went mute.
Yes. Oh, can you
Okay,
hear
I
me?
can hear you now. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Good,
Yeah.
good. Okay, good.
Yes. No, that
Oh
was so good.
yeah. Yeah, the word
Yes.
no is a big one.
And I know
It's a
for
big one.
me, sometimes the mom guilt, sets in.
Oh, it's
But my
real.
mom was here. It is. My mom was here a few weeks ago. Well, actually, she just left like this
Hmm.
past week, and she
Yeah.
was here for some time. And she suggested that I do an overnight stay. One of my girlfriends is not
Uh-huh.
here, so I'm kind of taking care of her place back and forth. Just looking
Uh-huh.
after her plants and everything. She
Yeah,
said, "Why
yeah.
don't you go stay over her
Nice.
place, for the night?" And
Uh-huh.
me and your husband, me and Antoine will take care of the kids.
Yeah.
So I think that Thursday, Justice ended up getting sick. And I felt
Oh.
so bad. And I was like, how can I leave my child? He's sick. He's,
Hmm. Hmm.
stopped up, coughing, and he had
Yeah.
vomited, and I'm like, I don't want to
Ooh,
leave him.
baby. Yeah.
Yes. But
Uh-huh.
my mom was like, you need to go. And I did. I
Yes.
needed to go. It was hard for me to not be here because I'm always here, but that's the
Yes.
problem.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
always here, And
Absolutely.
I needed that time to just get away,
Yeah,
and it was
you
amazing. I mean, it was
do.
24 hours, but it was
Uh-huh.
just what I
No.
needed, the
24
reset I
hours be
needed.
feeling like a whole week
Mhm.
vacation in like
Yes.
Bali sometimes. And you just, the only thing you did was sleep somewhere different and some
Yeah, that's
solitude.
it. That's
And
it.
so, yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really about that space. And it helps you to be a better mom when you come back. Because when
Yeah.
you're depleted again, when you're putting the mask on the kids, the mask is not on you, you're depleted, you're
Yep.
tired. And that's when we find ourselves irritable.
Hmm.
We find ourselves just short tempered. We just don't have much patience. We don't got the focus. We're thinking about a billion things, trying to play with these
Hmm.
Legos or toys. It's like, I don't even what you say.
Right.
And that's when we need a break. And we have
Yes.
to know our capacity
Hmm.
and know when we need a break and to take that. But mom guilt is very real. As you know,
Hmm.
I'm a new mom as well. And
Yeah.
so of a
Yeah.
2-year-old toddler. And,
Yes.
as much child work that I've done, he
Hmm.
challenges me in new ways. And I'm
Yeah.
really learning to really honor my capacity and to
Hmm.
ask for help. We've had
Yes.
conversations about vulnerability. I talk about vulnerability all the time. It's not the easiest thing for me to do. I'm a
Right.
very strong woman.
Hmm.
and,
Yep.
and and it's one of those things where it's like, Shonda, you cannot do it all. Ask your
Hmm.
husband to do that, because he will
Right.
do it if you
Yeah.
ask him.
Just
But if you out here
ask.
doing the most, he will also let you do that. And
Right.
so they will
Yep.
let you do it. So unless you're
This is
asking for
true.
help, he thinks I'm just doing what I usually
Yeah.
do. I'm
Yeah.
in
Like,
my
oh, you
mode.
got it. You can handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I've been doing better at that. Just like, what, hey,
Yeah. Me
tonight
too.
don't got it.
Yeah.
Don't got it to
Exactly.
give. So I need you to handle this bedtime routine because I
Right.
can't read another llama llama. Okay.
Oh shoot.
I
Oh
can't
my
watch another
goodness.
gummy bear. Like I
Exactly.
can't. And
Oh my
so I
goodness.
have to allow him to show up and support me, and really
That's
having
right.
that conversation with your partner. If you're not in
Yeah.
a relationship, having that conversation with your family and
Hmm.
just being real and being,
Yeah.
vulnerable. And I know that's not an easy thing to
Vulnerability.
do, but you
Right.
have to allow people to help you. I think one of the biggest things that I hear, and I think I kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, is sometimes I'll have people come in and they're so tired of helping and supporting. Everybody always comes to me and I'm always helping everybody and I don't ever need any help. And I'm like, well, do you ask people for help? Well,
Mm-hmm.
no, but I mean, people should know. And I'm like, people don't know,
People
because if
don't
you're
know.
always the help and you're always
Yeah.
showing up and you're always helping out financially, you're always watching the
Mm-hmm.
kids and you're always coming through and volunteering for this, everyone
Mm-hmm.
perceives that you're okay, that you
Yeah.
got it. And so they
Yeah.
don't know how to show up for you unless you let them know
Let
that you
them.
need support. So sometimes
Mhm.
people feel very isolated. There's a lot of anger and resentment toward families and partners and friends. And it's really
Mhm.
because you ain't asked for help. Like, so no one
Mhm.
knows, because everyone thinks
Nobody
you're
knows.
good. Like I
Yeah.
said, if you're running around doing everything, people are
Yep.
used to seeing that. So it's not until you
Mhm.
set boundaries and you show
Yeah.
people this is what I need now. So perhaps
Right.
historically I did all this, I did the most, but
Mhm.
it's got to look different. And
Can't
I
do it
talked to a
now.
lot of new moms about that specifically. So
Mhm.
perhaps you were doing the most before with like
Right.
business and work and all the things, but it changes. I think for
It definitely
sure, me
does.
becoming a mom put me in a position where I had to ask for help. And throughout
Yeah.
my career, it's like I was just doing it. I was,
Yep.
taking charge of my career, what I want to do, where I want to
Yeah.
go. And so becoming a mom was just like, wait, I do need some help. So I'm really going to have to ask somebody to do something for me. This is foreign territory because I'm always the help. And so, you know,
I was
again,
the
children
same
would teach
way.
you. Children would teach
Yeah.
you. Yeah. Yeah. I
Because
know
I
we
had,
shared that story.
yeah, we talked about that
Yeah.
because when I had my C-section, like that was, well, both of my C-sections, that's a
Yeah.
very vulnerable time.
Yes.
You cannot move, you know, like anytime you
Right.
have a surgery, anytime you
Right.
have anything that happens to you and you are depending on someone else and you are always used to doing things yourself.
Yeah. It's so hard.
Whew.
Yeah.
It is very difficult.
Mentally
Very, very.
challenging.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is very
Yeah.
mentally challenging.
hmm
Like I need to get stronger so I can get back up, and then got back up, and then had to sit back down because I got up too soon. You know, it
Yeah.
was just
You
like,
got to
you know, I had
allow
to
your
learn
body to
that.
heal, allow
Allow my
you, give
body to
yourself
heal.
what you need, and allow people to show up for you. And, you
Right.
know, trusting that the people that you're always showing up for will do the same for
Yeah.
you. And
Absolutely.
that can be very scary. And like you said, that could be also a trauma response of like not trusting that people will show up for you. So never asking for help and just pushing through and doing everything on your own because maybe you've been let down a lot in your life or, you know, no one ever really was consistently showing up for you. And I know that's the story for so many people who just have a lot of challenges in that regard. So
Yes.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. I
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Yeah, it's so much, you know, but unpacking our own stuff and labeling it. And I always tell people when you start therapy, you know, recognizing that it's a journey and that it's a process and no one's expecting you to change everything overnight. And I think you said it earlier, because this has been years and years of you feeling this way, years and years of you showing up and doing things the way that you do it. So just because you know better, like Maya Angelou said, you're gonna do better eventually. Okay, I'm gonna remix Maya. Because you know you can know better, but it might take you a while to do better, and that's okay. And that's a part of the journey of just being a human being.
Just being a human being.
So yeah,
that's true.
yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
so much.
Compassion. I'm all about compassion and grace. Having compassion for yourself. If you can't, owning the fact that you can't, you know, but not pushing yourself too hard, because I think that's what we do too much of, and it leads us to really heavy mental spaces. You know. Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
very true.
Yeah.
Very true. So if a young lady wants to maybe go down the same profession as you, what would you tell her, like if she's in college or if she's in high school even or middle school, like what paths would you tell her to take for this particular?
Definitely. You know, I told my story. I told my story at the beginning of how like I got to school and it was like, what do you want to be again? Check the box. And I'm just like, Oprah.
Right.
So check. Okay, but okay, clearly I'm not Oprah. So, you know, I'll be Oprah-ish one day. I'm gonna speak that into existence. And so I would say to maybe try to get a shadow situation going on, like see if you can shadow or just call a therapist. I have had people call me, just look me up on like online directories or listings and say they were in high school or they were like beginning in college, maybe as a freshman. They would call me and just interview me about my career path and different things. So I get out of the blue calls like that. And of course, I usually welcome them because I know the story of kind of not really knowing what I want to do. So I think early exposure to a career is a beautiful thing. So to actually talk to someone doing the work and to ask them all about it. Because if I had asked someone like a, you know, an anchor or a reporter or a writer, you know, about their experience prior to completing a whole degree, I would have known this ain't it. Okay. So I would have known that earlier on and been a whole lot of student loans less, you know, I would have been in a total different situation. And so, I would just say reach out to someone if you know someone, you know, ask questions, interview, you know, call up someone new, you know, talk to, if you're in high school, talking to your counselor, academic advisors, looking at specifically into those programs and going to talk to those people about, you know, all the different directions, because there's so many different directions to actually become a licensed clinical therapist, because you can go the clinical social worker route. So you have like a background in social work and you can get a license, become a licensed clinician in social work. Then you can also get a licensed marriage and family therapist, where you maybe focus more of your work on like couples works and family, couple work and family. And then there's, I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor. And so it's mental health counseling, but my emphasis was in marriage and family counseling when I was in school. And so you can go that route. You can go the psychology route. So you can go all the way up to get your doctorate. in psychology and do like testing and do research and write and contribute to academic articles and journals. So there's so many ways that you can go about it. But I think the best thing is to like talk to someone who's doing the work, you know, just ask for a quick interview like, hey, I'm thinking about this. What advice would you give someone? You know, it can be a quick phone call. And typically, I would say, you know, if you call, not everyone's might have a lot of time to give a person to do something like that. But just call around and see what insight you can gain prior to enrolling in those courses, or enroll in those courses, but then also, you know, do the work to like know, shadow or intern somewhere ahead of like actual graduation when you usually are doing those internships. You know, so the more you can know before you go into the program, the better, I would say. Yeah. But if that is a passion of yours and you really have a desire to help people and to really hold people's hands and help them, you know, navigate. I have people who come to me all the time and they're like, you know, I always give really good advice, so I want to be a therapist. And I was like, well, being a therapist is not about really giving really good advice, but your heart's in the right place, you know, but it's really about allowing someone space to do their own healing and being there and helping and helping them along the journey and giving them some practical skills, techniques, tools to navigate their life, you know, and where they are right now. And so, it's a beautiful career. It's very rewarding. It can be very challenging at times because work-life balance is a real thing, you know, listening to trauma all day, every day, can be difficult. So you really have to take care of yourself. So I really try to put my mask on first so that I can show up every day and be the best therapist I can be in session.
And be a wife and a mom.
And a wife and a mom and a daughter.
And a business owner.
And a boss. Yeah.
And a boss, exactly.
All the things. All the things.
Oh my goodness. I know Rhonda, she said, I put up posts about the word, about the word no periodically. So more people can relate. Yes. So people, please go to Rhonda's page, Rhonda Moffitt, and you know, see how you can, how you can say no, what that looks like, what that feels like, because a lot of us are yes people. Me, you know, I had to unlearn that too. You know, like, oh yeah, I can do that. I can do that. But no, like you said, knowing your capacity.
Yeah, that's huge.
So yes, it is.
Yeah.
Well, any departing words before we end tonight?
Yeah, I think you said it. Know your capacity. Yeah. that's my big. I think I say that like 50 million times a day.
That's all right.
But know your capacity. Know your worth, you know, really tune into self. Like, what do I need? What do I need more of? What do I need less of? And, you know, if you're even curious about starting therapy, to know that, you know, you can find really great resources online that can help you navigate. There's psychologytoday.com. There's a platform that I love by psychologists out of Atlanta called Therapy for Black Girls. Is also a wonderful podcast, Therapy for Black Girls. Wonderful podcast where you can learn a lot about all things, and it's targeted toward Black women, but it's a great, but if you want to look specifically for a clinician of color, that's a great resource to look into. And you can literally look into, you know, your therapist. You can talk to them about what your needs are, interview your therapist. I always encourage people to call around, you know, get a feel for who you're talking to, who you're going to be working with, because that therapeutic relationship is so important. So if it's not a good fit, then the progress probably won't happen. And you're not going to really get out of therapy what you could get out. So you want to feel like you have a good fit. But I wouldn't say go to therapy once and be like, this ain't it. Okay. Because the first session is always a little different than all the future ones. So you want to go, give it a couple of sessions and see how comfortable you feel. See if you feel heard, you know, if you really feel seen, and then go forward. And if you don't, it's okay to pivot and go to another therapist. And that's very common practice, but you won't get the results that you're seeking or wanting if you're not comfortable in that setting. So definitely, if you're thinking about therapy, call. Many therapists offer like a 15-minute free consultation. I know that I do, and I literally answer questions. I help them to understand what the therapeutic process looks like so they kind of know what to expect. And just, you know, if you have that feeling and if it keeps coming up, I encourage you to deepen into that and lean into that, and to take that step to get the support that you need. And there's no shame in asking for help. It's actually one of the most courageous things you can do, because it's something that as Black women, we've been kind of encouraged not to do, and there hasn't really been space for us to do that. And so again,
Exactly.
I believe that we are a healing generation. So
We
the
are.
decisions that you make now impact
Hmm.
future babies, future nieces and
Hmm.
nephews,
Yes,
your generation. You have
yes,
the ability to shape and change that narrative of your
yes.
generation.
Even
And
if
so
you're
to
an
lean into that.
auntie or
Yeah.
uncle or cousin or
Hmm.
mentor, you still have that
Absolutely.
ability, yes,
Yeah.
to change
Yeah.
that. I know Psychology Today is one.
Uh-huh.
Actually, Psychology Today is a good one to find a Black therapist. That's actually how
Yeah.
I found mine because I
Okay.
wanted to see the picture. I
Oh
wanted to see who
yeah.
I was getting, because I
Yeah.
needed someone to be able to relate to me and my
Uh-huh.
experiences. So that's why I went to Psychology Today. And
Yeah.
then you can put in your zip
Psychology.
code and everything.
Yeah. Your
And then you
symptoms,
said
like
there
what
was
you want to
another
work
one.
on. You can put in
Yes.
all of that. And even your
Hmm.
insurance, if you're looking to use insurance, you can put in
Yes.
your insurance and it'll kind of narrow it down to providers in
Hmm.
your area. You can also call the number on the back of your insurance card, usually the member services number, and they'll send you out an email list of therapists who accept your insurance, and you can
Hmm.
use that list to also navigate online and go visit some websites and see who you
Yes.
get a good feel for. But definitely, if they offer a 15-minute consultation, or you can
Hmm.
request that just to get that
Yes.
information, get the vibe of the person. If you can have
Hmm.
that time to definitely take it and shop around, and don't feel
Hmm.
bad about saying, okay, thanks for the information. Let me keep looking. You can do
Right.
that because again, that therapeutic alliance and that relationship matters so much
It
to
matters.
outcomes. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
And
so
you said
therapy for
therapy
Black
for Black girls.
girls.
That's what,
Uh-huh.
okay.
Yeah,
Therapy for Black girls.
therapyforblackgirls.com.
Okay.
Awesome podcast. If you're a
Hmm.
podcaster, it's a great
Yes.
one. I learn a lot from just listening
Hmm.
in, and feel really supported and seen when I listen to it.
Yes.
So
Oh, thank
yeah.
you, Rhonda. I absolutely love this. Oh, we need you. We sure do need you, Shonda. So thank you for your
Oh,
work,
thank
for
you.
all of your work
Yes.
you're doing for our community. And
Yeah.
representation truly does matter. I
It
mean,
does.
it
It
truly does
does.
matter when you
Hmm.
found someone that can relate to you
Yeah.
on a
Hmm.
on a level.
Yeah. And there's something about
Mhm.
the person across from you looking like you, even if those
Yeah.
experiences are very different. It's just
Hmm.
something about that. And I get a lot of calls where people is like, I'm just happy to see, women of color. In my practice, I have two other therapists that work with me, and
Hmm.
they're women of color as well. So
Yeah.
sometimes if I'm like full at the time and I'm like, well, maybe you could see this therapist, and they're like, are they Black? And I'm like,
Right.
yes, they are. They are clinicians of color. And so,
Right.
and they were
Right.
like, I don't mean no offense, but I just
Yeah.
think that's really what I need. And I was like, there's nothing offensive about asking for what
No.
you need. And I think we got to
Exactly.
change that narrative too.
We do.
So,
We do. What
yeah.
we need.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And what you
Wow.
want too. So not even
Yeah.
just needs, what you
That's
want.
true.
You got a
What
right
you
to say what
want.
you want too. And
Hmm.
so learning that more and more, and
Yes.
helping people to see that more and more, most
Hmm.
importantly. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Thank you, Shonda,
Thanks
for
for
being
having
here
me. I
tonight.
enjoyed this. I was worried
This was
about my energy
amazing.
level.
I know. I remember.
I was
Yeah,
like,
I
I
got your
don't
text.
know. I was like,
You
I'm
said
trying to
you
be
will be
awake right now.
fine. Yes, I had some green tea, so we were pulling from each other, honey.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, but this
yes.
was
Thank
great. I
you.
appreciate the space that you're creating, and just your
Yeah.
whole movement and mission. I think is just so
Mm.
powerful because we do have
Oh,
to love ourselves, and
yeah.
just that level of comfort in our own skin. I think that's so
Yes.
important. So I just love everything
Mhm.
that Puppy Girls Club's about, and
Oh,
I just
thank
love like
you.
watching you. I'm like, let me get back to work. I'll be watching your stories. And like, oh, that's good. That's a good quote. That was powerful. And I'm like,
Oh
I'll
my
be trying to order
goodness.
headscarves. I'll be on there looking at. I'm like, okay. I think also
I
when I watch your
know.
videos, I get all
And
this
stop.
stuff about hair products. I'm like, okay, Instagram's
Hmm.
watching what I'm looking at. So I'm getting
Yes.
all this
They
advertisement.
watch.
Yes.
Hmm.
But this
They
is a
watch.
beautiful space that you're creating. And I'm just glad to be a part of your second live,
Thank
Shayla.
you. I appreciate it, Shonda. I do. This is
Yeah.
just something that's always been near and dear to me. I mean, it was
Mhm.
instilled in me. Like
Yeah.
I say, in my posts, my grandmother was a hairstylist, Rhonda's a hairstylist, and
Yeah.
just that. And my aunt she's a clinical therapist as well. So
Oh, okay.
we have
Yeah.
that encouraging
Hmm.
spirit about us.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I love encouraging women. I love
Hmm.
encouraging
Hmm.
us,
Yeah.
to their next level.
Yes.
And me in this space now that I'm in,
Hmm.
I am in a season of learning how to reach
Yeah.
out, how
Uh-huh.
to say, I need help,
Hmm.
I need,
Hmm.
hey,
Yeah.
something's going on. I need somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I'm not
in that
100%.
space.
It's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
Because a lot of times we think that our friends are going through, so we can't talk to them because they're
Hmm.
going through.
Hmm.
But we're all going through, so we all
Right.
got to talk about
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
all
And
got to
you
talk
never know
about
what that phone call to a friend about what you're
it. Yeah.
going through, how that might just help them to see, okay, I'm not the only one. And I always
Right.
tell people that I think that's the power of like group therapy and spaces like that,
Mm-hmm.
where you get to hear that you're not the only one about feeling this way or struggling in this
Yeah.
way, and that, yeah, you're just not alone. And I think that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing, that when we do feel isolated, it does a lot of damage to
Mm-hmm.
us and our ability to
Truly.
heal and be in a better space.
Yes.
So
Truly.
yeah, yeah. You've
Truly.
always been an encourager. I've always called you for encouragement, and you've always encouraged me and
Thank
prayed for me,
you.
prayed with me.
Mm-hmm.
You've always been that for me. So I always tell people, you don't
Yeah.
have to be a licensed clinical therapist, to be an encourager of just people and
Yeah.
recognize the human experience and just want to
Mm-hmm.
see people win, and just live
Yes.
the lives they've
Live their
been
best
wanting
life.
to live and be who they want to be. And
That's
so I
right.
think it's a beautiful thing when we can tap
Mm-hmm.
into that. So in any
Amen.
capacity you can do that, this is a beautiful space you've created.
Thank you, Shonda. I
Yeah, you're
appreciate that.
welcome.
Yes,
You're
and thank you for the
welcome.
work again that you're doing. Everyone, go to Sims
Yeah.
Counseling, check her out, check out her yoga services. I actually fell
Yes.
asleep last Thursday.
Hey, namaste. You were in your zone.
I was knocked out.
You got what you needed.
It was what I needed. It was what
That
I
means you were
needed.
completely relaxed and you gave
Hmm.
yourself permission to really be
Yeah.
present in that moment.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was. I truly
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
All
Good.
right. Well, until next time, everybody, we will see you then. All
Good
right. Thanks,
night.
everybody, for joining us tonight. Bye, Shonda. See
Bye.
everybody later.